Welcome to the Big Life Podcast, where dreams aren't just imagined, they're built brick by brick, belief by belief. Hosted by Neal Oates Jr. and Robin Lewis, this show is your invitation to discover your amazing capabilities, invest in your growth, and unleash your potential in ways you've only dreamed of. Join Neal and Robin as they dive deep into stories, insights, and tools designed to inspire you to show up big, live intentionally, and give yourself away for the betterment of those around you. Get ready to rise to what you're truly worthy of. The Big Life starts now.
Welcome to the Big Life Podcast, ladies and gentlemen. Neal Oates Jr. here with none other than Mr. Robin Lewis. Robin, how are you doing today, sir?
Hey, Neal, I'm doing great, man. Just good to be here, sir. Looking forward to this amazing topic we're going to cover today.
Hey, so ladies and gentlemen, we're here on the Big Life Podcast. You all are catching us after we've had a roller coaster conversation. Not that it was bad, but it was just all over the place, as Robin and Neal are in our real lives. Robin, we were talking about one of the guys that we study, that we follow, Les Brown, right? And talking about being prepared for opportunities. So we're even going to bring Les Brown into our conversation today. We're going to bring Jamie Kern-Lima into our conversation today. But what's new? What's exciting in your world before we even get started with the official podcast, sir?
Oh, man, new and exciting. Well, I like the first thing that comes to my mind is my daughter and grandson are coming down to visit today. And so I'm very excited about that. They'll be here for a little bit over a week. And so I'm very excited about spending the next week with them. And so, yeah, that's, I don't have to say much more than that, sir. How about you, man?
I see it on your face, Robin. Every time you
lit
mention,
up as I said that, right? I just kind of lit up.
you lit up. So for me, what is new and exciting is, and we talked about this off air, I was rejected. Not once. I was rejected twice, Robin.
And I was like, what?
I submitted for a national speaking gig, and I received my rejection letters today via email. So first, I do want to say, I wish they would have called me. And I know they're busy and they got people, but to receive bad news via phone call is better, in my opinion, is better than receiving it via email, especially when the title gave me a little bit of hope, right? It was like, update on your submission request. And so, you know me, I'm an optimist. I opened it up and I was like, maybe they sent it to the wrong person, even though it had my name in there. It had the title of my presentation, Robin. We regret to inform you. And I was like, but here's the heart, Robin, that's not the ouch. The ouch is, this is the 6th year in the row that I've had 2 presentations rejected by this organization.
Come on.
So maybe one day you're going to receive that phone call. Robin, you won't believe what happened. And you'll be like, I knew it. I do believe it. Or maybe one day you're going to receive that phone call, Robin, I give up, I quit. I'm never submitting to them again.
No, I don't think I'm going to receive that one. I think this is going to be a beautiful story. It's so awesome that you're being transparent with our listeners today and sharing that, because I'm sure there are many of our listeners, if not all of them, that have received some sort of rejection. If you're moving forward in life, you're going to have rejection. And yeah, the fact that Neal can talk about it and share about it here, what I am expecting to hear is that time when, Robin, guess what, brother? Oh my goodness. Not only did I get accepted, I did my talk and they want me back next year, baby.
Robin, I don't think it's a coincidence on the day that we're recording this episode. Is the day that I received this news, right? Because we're talking about this idea of you're not crazy, you're just first, right? The greatness inside of you, right? You're not crazy, you're just first.
Yeah, so fitting.
And so, Robin, I'm sitting here and I even asked you, I said, Robin, am I crazy to keep submitting for these national platforms? Am I crazy? Because I feel crazy, right? Like, who am I to be accepted? I have to be careful not to expect or accept the failure or the rejection and make it personal, which we've talked about in our previous episode, like why failure feels so personal. Man, so between the last recording that we've done and this episode, I've had to live it out, Robin, ladies and gentlemen, and then figure out, do I really believe what I say I believe? But Robin, would you just share from the onset, when you hear you're not crazy, you're just first, what comes to your mind, sir?
Man, I think that this is such a I think it's such a big subject. That's what comes to my mind first. It's one of those where I want my grandson to learn this message, Neil. I want everybody to learn this message because I think the tendency for all of us is to have doubt, to have uncertainty, to want to compare ourselves to others and to compare ourselves to others, not just want to. That's how we live, really. And then base our level of greatness based upon what others say or think, and it's so far from the truth. So like I said to you, this is one of those subjects as we get into discussion, like we're not reading from a script or anything like that, just for our listeners' sake. But this is one of those that I want to try and make sure and capture all that I can to share with you,
Yeah.
our listeners, because I do believe that every one of us have greatness within us. We have potential that far exceeds what we have lived into or lived out, however you want to say that. And we have way more potential than what we can even think or imagine.
Yeah.
That's the first thing that I would say. The second thing that I would say, Neil, is that I buy into this idea, and I need to remind myself of it, that there's no other Robin. There's no
Come on,
other
sir.
Neil. And not just my name, right? There's no other individual Robin. Like, I have a unique set of gifting, skill, talent, experience, heart, or passion that I bring to life that no other individual, no other human being has.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the reasons why I love this subject, actually. And I look forward to diving into it.
Robin, we even started out before we recording talking about this tension of things that I'm looking at in my business, in my life, between the calling that we know we have on our lives and the confidence to execute or live that calling out. And so really, that's what this episode is going to explore, ladies and gentlemen, that tension between the two. Because sometimes, if we're honest, we are not confused, arrogant, we're not rebellious, or even unrealistic, right? Many times we're just the first one in our family, in our circle, our industry, or our environment to believe for something bigger, right? And so here's what I mean. In my circle, Robin, I'm the first, right? The affluent Negroes, ladies and gentlemen, I'm holding the book up. I'm the first one in my circle, in my family, to write a book and to professionally publish it and to expose myself to the masses and to be open to the critique, to the feedback. So at first, I would ask the question, am I crazy? And I, fortunately, had great people who are even mentioned on the back of the book here, Robin Lewis, international speaker, trainer, and coach, to say, no, you're not crazy, Neal. You're just the first one to do it. And so, Robin, before I let you in on this, I just want to share where this work came from. So one came from Les Brown. So we mentioned Les Brown, but his idea, his message, his resounding message that you have greatness within you. But then the other part of this comes from a book that you recommended to me, Jamie Kern Lima's book, Worthy. You're not crazy. You may just be the first one. So us finding the confidence to live out, to be fully who we were created to be, while knowing that we have greatness within us. So that's what I want to share. Now, here's where I want to kick it to you, Robin. What do you say to that person who has been listening to us for 9 minutes and they're like, if they don't go any further, I identify exactly with what they're saying, because we think we're crazy, whether we're Christian, whether we're female, whether we're minority, right? We might think that there are these limits placed on our lives. And if we look around, there's no one doing what we do, speaking the way we speak, chasing after the lifestyles that we're chasing after, these big lives. And then we say, Well, maybe I'm crazy to believe it's possible. Go ahead, Robin. What do you say to us today?
Yeah, no, I say believe even more. I say that's why we do this podcast actually. One of the reasons why I exist on this earth is to starting with me, believe in my uniqueness, believe in my potential, believe that there is greatness, the seed of greatness within me. I have to pause and say very quickly, we're not saying that you're putting yourself above others, right? Because if you follow through with what we're saying everyone has that seed of greatness within them. We're saying that everyone is unique, right? And so I can't do Neal. Neal can't do Robin, right? I can't do you, fill in your name. And you can't do me, right? So we're not saying that you're going to be better than somebody else, but what we are saying is to recognize that there is something that you bring that nobody else can. See the difference?
Robin, so hold on. I see the difference and I understand that difference, but here's where, so even as you're saying that, something comes to my mind, and I would love your input on this because of the work that you do with individuals, business owners, leaders who find themselves right here. One of the reasons people struggle with confidence or belief that they can do this thing is because we want proof before we believe. So Robin's telling me that I can be a great leader. I can be this great person, that I have greatness within me, but I'm looking for the proof first. But many times we believe that greatness often begins as potential before it becomes performance. How do you, when you're working with those clientele, with those leaders who have that potential inside, but it's not yet performance, when they don't have the proof, how do you navigate that for them and with them on this journey?
Yeah, it's a great question. There are two quick thoughts that come to my mind. First of all, one is that it's let's get some wins under your belt. I think the
Yeah.
more, Neil, when you and I were starting to play pickleball, the more that we were able to go out there and start hitting the ball, first of all, and then putting it where we want to put it. And then, right? So you get some wins under your belt. I think the more wins you get under your belt is the more confidence and belief that you develop, and that you start to see that you can do this thing, right? That's the first thing that I would say. But the second thing that I do, and I think this is ongoing work, is to get clarity around self, get clarity around who you are. Remember who you are, first of all. So I help people to remember who they truly are. Right? They're born with purpose. They have a remarkable mind that is you and I believe we're created in the image of our maker. So some of the nature of our maker has been given to us. And one of those is our ability to think and to create.
Yeah.
And so I help people to recognize the fact that we have this amazing capability that sets us apart from everything else that's been created on this earth, right? That we have the ability to think. And in so doing, we can actually create. And in so doing, we can then, like guide the path of our lives. We can create the future that we're trying to create. So we have amazing capabilities. And then we look at the uniqueness. Like, what are your strengths? um how are you made up? Like, what are you really good at? Like, Neil, you and I were talking earlier before we came on here, and you shared a couple of things that, man, Rob, it doesn't matter. I don't This is not like work for me. When I'm doing this, I am not working. I'm made for this. I love
Yeah,
doing
man.
this. I'm good at it. Right. And so I think a part of discovering ourselves and discovering that uniqueness and that greatness is identifying how you are strung up. What are you good at? What are your strengths? And then, so Neil, like some of the same stuff you do with your clients. I mean, we talk about values. What are your values? What is important to you? What really matters to you? And as we work through these things, we also consider the story or stories that we've been telling ourselves. A lot of times what keeps us back are the stories that we tell ourselves. And so we work on that as well to try and help to recognize that a lot of times we have stories that limit our potential, that limit how we see ourselves and therefore what we do. I have to pause because I've said a lot there. Help, add to it or If you want to
Robin,
dive in a little
I
bit more in that,
I
share
was
your
telling myself, I was telling myself the wrong story a couple days ago, and and I've shared this with you. I heard your voice. I heard the voice of God. For some claim. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not saying that Robin's voice is the voice of God. I don't want you. I do not want you all to interpret that.
Bring it, baby.
They are not the same thing. So we talk about, so Robin and I, we talk about the value of communication and being clear. So when I said I heard Robin's voice and I heard the voice of God, those are two separate voices, just so we have 100% clarity.
Sir, I don't want you to lose your train of thought. Please hold it. Don't lose it. Keep it, keep it,
I
keep it.
got it. I got it.
But I just want to add here, they had no thought whatsoever that you were putting Robin in that.
Don't know. I don't want to assume, right? Because you do know we have an elevated audience. And so I believe we're so smart that sometimes we could be too smart. And they were like, man, cause some people aren't watching this, Robin, so they're listening to us and they're putting your voice right there with James Earl Jones, right? So they're putting your voice right there with Earl Nightingale.
Come
Right?
on.
And so
I wish.
they're like, oh man, that is the voice of God, right? So for some people, you could be the equivalent of Morgan Freeman, right? So you could just have that island flair for the Morgan Freeman. So next time we do a Lego movie and we need a voice of God, but he is from the island, from the Caribbean islands, then we'll cast you.
So my good buddy, please don't move. You were going with somewhere really good.
So
Please,
I have it. I have it. So you talk about being authentic, right? And in the stories that we tell ourselves, I had told myself that I was crazy and that me trying to do things unique and with my own flair, using my gifts and talents would not work. I had told myself that it's not me trying to be the first one to do it in my circle. It's the one that's getting off track while everyone else was operating in clarity. When the reality is that hit me yesterday was that I had fallen into the herd and I'm not a herd animal, right? I had fallen into being a sheep instead of the shepherd. So I had started following what the masses were doing and I had really squashed my individuality, that uniqueness that you talk about, that voice and those things that had been put inside of me because I had not seen the proof before, right? And so now I'm like, well, if I haven't seen the proof, if I haven't seen the results, then maybe the promise isn't there, right? Maybe I misheard this thing. Maybe I am crazy. Maybe the voices are leading me down the wrong path. And so I think I had to, I know I had to tap back into myself, Rob, to make sure that I was still and that I reflected and that I knew what was going on. So here's where I want to kick this back to you. Knowing, and so ladies and gentlemen, Robin and I, we're not experts, but we are students. So as much as you've studied people, Robin, why do you think people struggle to believe they have greatness inside of them before we see the visible proof in your experience?
Yeah, I think it's such a good question. Because I think, as I hear you share it, Neal, like I want to like pause for a moment and just, like let that sit a while with our listeners, because I think we've all, Neal, I got a few years on you and I still struggle with that. I still sometimes can get to a place where I get a little frustrated or I get a little disappointed or impatient, or I think things should be further on than what they are in different areas of my life. And so we're touching on something that I think all of our listeners can relate to. And so I love just talking about it. First of all, like I love your transparency. Again, here you are today, being very transparent with our listeners. And the good about that is that we can relate to it. We've all experienced it. And that's why we need people in our lives. That's one of the reasons why we need to be able to voice that, first of all. And we can voice it in a place where, number one, we have people that are going to receive that and encourage us and challenge us. Maybe, like, come on, it's all right, man. You're there. You're that close. Don't worry. Right. We need people in our lives to actually help us through those times. I felt it. I remember, Neil, I've shared with you where I remember it now, because I was literally in tears, crying out to God, asking, why is this not happening? And so I've been there too. And I think, the key there is the foundation. Like, what are you basing the statement that we are making to our listeners today, Neil? Let's talk about this because I think this is the answer to your question. What are we basing this thought that there is greatness in me, within me to begin with? Like, what am I basing that on? Right?
Hmm.
And so I think it's understanding that, first of all, and then recognizing that it's a process. Like, one of the things that you and I teach is that living into our potential is going to require us to continue growing. It's unfortunate, but fortunate at the same time. None of us just kind of are born, where we're living into our full potential, right? It doesn't take long for Robin to get an opportunity to talk about Jalen, right? Like, he learned to crawl and fall and walk. And now he's learning to talk, right? And
Hmm.
he's learning words. And then it won't be long before he's talking. The only way that we live into our potential is through growth. And so what Neil and I want you to hear is that yes, we want results and we should celebrate the results that we are experiencing. Neil, you and I talk about this a lot, right? I think one of the things that we can do to combat that feeling that we're not seeing what we're expecting to see is to celebrate the victories that we are experiencing. And a lot of times we don't do that, especially people like you and I, people like our listeners who are always looking to get better. We're looking to produce and get results, and we're moving forward, and we're ambitious.
Hmm.
And so there are many times where people have to remind me. I can remember my dad saying it to me just a few years ago. It's recent. Rob, you have to stop and celebrate the good that you have accomplished. Your tendency is to kind of look at the areas, you're always looking to get better, and you're always looking at the areas where you're not doing so well. But you should celebrate the good that you have done as well. Neil, listeners, I'm going to pause. I feel like I've circled a little bit. I don't know if I've answered the question. I know one thing we should touch on is what is the basis of the
Yeah.
greatness that we have?
Yeah. And so I think that's key for anything that we do, asking, right, that foundation, because you mentioned the foundation. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to encourage you to ask yourself, like, what is my foundation? What is the basis? What is my my barometer? What am I measuring greatness based upon? Is it in what I can do? Is it in who I am, or is it in whose I am? And once again, Robin and I believe that we were just created in the image of God, that Jesus Christ is our Lord and Savior. And now we're not forcing our opinions, our beliefs on you, but we do want to encourage you to do the work to wrestle with that yourself, because we believe there's some growth in that. Now, Robin, here's where I want to go, because as much as I forget that I have greatness in me, and sometimes I think I'm crazy, other times my crazy ideas seem like perfect sanity. For instance, you know me, you know that I have this wild and crazy belief and knowledge and knowing that someone is going to give me a ridiculous gift, right? They are going to gift me a private jet, right? And we are not talking about something that might be able to just get us from here to 30 minutes away. We're talking about one of the top of the line G650ER by Gulfstream, right? A $60+ million jet. And I wholeheartedly believe that someone's going to say, we see the work that Neal is doing. We see the impact that he's having. Let's bless him with that. And so I know that from the outside, I look crazy, right? Because I'm the first one to think in my circles, to think or to believe or act or move that way. And it's been called unrealistic. It's been called believing too much or being out of touch. They even call me strange. My friends and I, we have this word peculiar, right? So that we consider ourselves part of the peculiar few. Sometimes what I've had to accept is that the resistance from the outside, it is just confirmation that I am moving in the right direction, right? That I'm going beyond the familiar. And now, ladies and gentlemen, I want you all to hear the same guy who believes that someone can give him a $60 million jet is the same guy who doubts his worthiness to be on the stage in front of a few hundred people. Right. And so this is not by any means once you set it and forget it and you have that mentality locked in, this is a daily work. So even as we get on early to discuss the topics and I'm sharing my heart with Robin, I want you all to know that, yes, you may feel crazy at times, but you're not. And then the things that would make someone else crazy, it might be totally sane to you. So, Robin, I want to go to you. So thinking about how I think different sometimes, how I believe different. And I'm just going to toss this out here and maybe you'll have an answer to this, maybe not. How can listeners, right? Because if I'm not careful, I can share my belief with someone. I could share my crazy thoughts with them and they'd be like, Neal, you're way out there, right? Or they could say, okay, how can an audience tell the difference between wise counsel and fear-based criticism? And so the reason I ask that is when I tell you about the G650ER, you get excited. And the way your mind works is you start connecting dots. And next thing I know, you and we have a potential meeting with someone who is in the aviation business around all of the private jets that I like and that I'm looking for, as opposed to saying, Neal, break your dream down a little bit, pull back. How can I tell the difference between wise counsel and fear-based criticism, Rob?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very interesting question. I think, the first thing that I would say to people, as I'm going to answer this question, but I'm going to start very basic. Okay, Neal? So I heard this thought from Earl Nightingale many years ago, where he taught that, we have this amazing capability and power. And so this is one of the things that I base this thought about. There's greatness within us. And that is, like we want to get a bicycle. We got it. Right. We wanted to get a new TV. We got it. We wanted to get a new phone. We figured out how to get it. We wanted to get a new refrigerator. We figured out how to get that. We wanted to get new furniture. We figured out how to get that. We wanted to get new clothes, new wardrobe. You fill in the blank now of some of these things. And what he was sharing is the same power that we use to get those things is the same power that we can use to get that. What is it called?
The G650ER.
G650ER.
Extended range, yes.
It's just bigger thinking, right? But the point is that we have the wherewithal to get the things that we think about. And this is not, like I believe I can fly. And so now you're going to be able to fly, right? Like that song, I believe I can fly, right?
Whoa, 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 whoa. Ladies and gentlemen, you have just heard an original sound from Robin Lewis.
Sir, I haven't heard that song for the longest while, actually.
We will be releasing his cover album, right, where he's going to cover some of the top pop, I don't know if he's going to do rap, but we're going to have some gospel stuff in there. It will be released on the Big Life record label. So you heard it here first. Robin, come on, man.
Touch the sky. Yeah, but Neal, so I want to be clear. We're not saying pie in the sky here, like name it, claim it kind of a thing. But it's just a thin line, because what we are saying is that what we put our minds to, like you've heard the proverb, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he.
Right.
We're talking about the fact that we do have the wherewithal to cause things to happen in our lives. That's the potential that we have. And so I think somebody who encourages you, Neal, I think somebody who understands that concept, I think somebody who believes in you and your capabilities, I think somebody who is a dreamer themselves.
Yeah.
And so I think somebody who has been exposed to, the Wright brothers, who, for our listeners who may not by chance have heard of the Wright brothers, but they're the ones that designed and flew the first airplane. Their dad told them that they were crazy. Right? I heard this by a comedian, Andy Stanley, when he talked about Can you believe the guy that ate the first egg? Like, he turned to his buddy and he says, "Hey, next thing that falls out of that chicken's butt, I'm gonna eat it." That's so funny. That's so funny, but the point is, think about, anything of the first is
Yeah.
going to seem crazy to somebody else. And so, I'm not sure. I think it depends on the person that's saying it, Neil. That's what I would say. It depends on where they are. Yeah, there's some times where we have to be realistic also. There's some things, like, I am not going to fly like a bird. That's the obvious one, right?
Right. Of
I'm not a bird.
course.
I am not going to be a opera singer. Like, right, Rob, you're not going to be an yeah.
Hold on. Hold on. I can't agree with that one. I just heard you say, I believe I can.
Gosh. And I mean, can't, like, I wish. I'm one of those wish. But the point is, yeah, there's some things, you and I talk about this too, is it's not just dreaming it, but also looking at your capabilities and your skill sets and your makeup or temperament and all these various different things to consider when we're considering that we want to go in a certain direction in life, right?
Yeah.
And so there are times where we can be unrealistic in our thinking.
Robin, I want to jump in here because I know I was asking you about the whole idea of wise counsel versus a negative Ned or Nancy, just saying like fear based. But even if you have the right people in your life, even if you have the skills and talents, I want to go from Les Brown's there's greatness within you, right? There's greatness that can be birthed out of you to Jamie Kern Lima's worthy, right? And now having the conversation about worthiness,
Yeah.
because we can have gifts, talents, dreams. We can have positive people in our lives, wise counsel. But if we don't believe that we are worthy, we might still self-sabotage. So I even mentioned me applying for this national speaking thing, right? So my worthiness or my belief of my own worthiness could impact whether or not I apply for a seventh year, right? It can determine whether I walk into that room, whatever that room is. It's going to impact the relationships. For our business owners on here, Robin, our entrepreneurs, our leaders, their worthiness, their own belief of their worthiness might impact the prices that they charge or the opportunities that they accept. And so here's what we know, and I think Jamie Lima does a great job of communicating this in her book Worthy. And ladies and gentlemen, Robin and I, we do not get anything from the books. We don't get anything from the speakers or the people that we mentioned. We just really want to introduce you to some people maybe. But Jamie Kern Lima, she talks about that you will rarely pursue consistently what you secretly believe you are not worthy to possess, right? And so the crazy thing, Robin, I think I'm worthy of a $60 million jet because I know the good that it could do, right? And I know what the purpose is in the heart. I have to make sure that I don't then become misaligned with my worthiness to impact people's lives from speaking on the platform and making sure they hear maybe a sentence or a phrase or a story that could change the direction of their lives. So I'm just curious. Maybe you could either talk about how low self worth shows up in everyday life, or why people can believe in God and still struggle. Like we see Christians who believe in God and believe in others, but don't believe in themselves. So,
Yeah.
anything you want to share just on the value of worthiness when we're looking at it towards ourselves, Rob?
Yeah, I think it's real. First of all, I would say that we all have some degree. I remember Jamie Kern Lima sharing in her book that I think it's over 80% of the people in our society struggle with some form of low self-worth or self-doubt. And so it's a real thing for the majority of us, right? And so that's the first thing that I would say. The second thing that I would say, Neil, is that it's something that we have to work on. There's still things that I struggle with after having done work on this type of work on myself and my belief, what I believe about myself, and what I believe I'm worthy of, and so on. I've done work on myself like this for years, and I still have plenty of room for growth. So that's the second thing that I would say to our listeners. It's a process. So don't get too hard on yourself. Recognize that we actually have to be very vigilant about it, very intentional. I have to be very intentional, Neal, when I have the thoughts. This is what I would share with our listeners, to then change the thought. Recognize the thought comes along, but then you have to remind yourself, so much so, Neal, that I have it here. I'm going to pull it out here. I might not get to this every day, but I get to this most days, where I have this thing that I have written down 10 things to remind me who I am.
Come on.
I am a masterpiece, not a mistake. And I back it up with some scripture, right? Ephesians 2:10, for those of you who are following the scripture. I was designed with intention. I'm not here to just survive. I was made for good, meaningful work that God prepared just for me. I am made by God on purpose. Right? God, so, in Genesis 1:27, God created mankind in his own image, male and female. He created them. So I'm not an accident or an afterthought. I was handcrafted by the creator of the universe, made to reflect his nature. My ability to love, think, create, and lead comes from him. And I just go on with these kind of things, Neal, where I have to remind myself, because I think sometimes we forget who we are. And so that's what I would say, in terms of this discussion here. It's real. Most of us struggle with it, and it's a process. We have to take a little time working on it intentionally, and it actually drives the results that we experience in our lives. It starts with remembering who we are. It's so vital, actually, Neal, and a lot of times we forget it, and we don't give ourselves the time to remember it.
Robin, I appreciate you sharing that. And so that's going to lead us directly into this next piece that I want to touch on. I mentioned that as I wrote The Affluent Negroes, I was the first one in my family to do something like that. And so as I was in the process, it felt lonely, right? Even though I had an editor, I had someone to proof everything. I had some counsel to bounce ideas off. It still felt lonely. And so I had to reframe my thoughts and my position from being lonely to being a trailblazer, right? To being someone who is focused on legacy and the legacy impact. And so now I want to talk to you about being the first and what that feels like versus creating legacy, right? Thinking of legacy. And so I don't think a better place, I can't think of a better place to go than to as a granddad, right? And so first, my question to you is, in your family, were there other business owners in your family? Because I know you own a business, you sold a business, you ran a successful deal, that you are breaking into and you've established yourself in this coaching realm and helping leaders transform their lives, their organizations, their families. Are you the first in either of those? And if so, or if not, whether you're the first or not, how does that impact the confidence you have going into a thing?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I think we need to have mentors in our lives, Neal. I really do. But to answer your question specifically, I was not the first. In fact, my parents, they both worked jobs for most of their lives, but then they got to a place where they decided to take what they had gathered, their pension, their, whatever they called it, in where they were working. I don't know if it was pension, but some sort of company savings that they had going, and they were able to take that and then go buy a gas station. So they actually became entrepreneurs.
Hold on. Oh, okay. So were they the first ones, as far as you know, to do that? Or is this a long line, or are you from a long line of entrepreneurs, Robin?
It's funny, I did a study. It was a part of Leadership College, by the way. I've shared that with you.
Right?
I forget what it's called. I think it's a genealogram. Well, it's not a DNA thing. It's where you're looking back in your family history to see if you can uncover patterns
Mm-hmm.
that were in your family, right? And I was actually quite surprised to see that my grandmother, there are several people within my family that actually were business people. And so they weren't the first ones, like my mother's mother, for example, it wasn't a major business, but she sold like produce. She sold fruits and, those kind of things, right? Produce. And then she had a farm where they grew it and she would sell it. And so, like I didn't think of it like that, but that she was a business person. And, I had an uncle that they provided plants for business places, where they take care of it for you, right? So they make them look good. If they're not, they bring in new ones. So they kind of take care of making sure that your business place, your building is looking good with plants. That was a business, like,
Yeah.
and anyway, the long story short is when I took the time to look back like that, I realized that there was a lot of them who did that. But yeah, even in that process, being out there and doing what we did, there are a lot of times where I felt like I was the only one out there, like I felt like it was just me who understood all that I was going through and all that was happening, right? And so, yeah, I have definitely felt like in that place where I was kind of blazing the trail.
Yeah.
And yeah,
All right. So
right
now,
back to you.
so for me, I'm very much like you. I was fortunate enough, right? Because my entire goal, my dad, he had a plumbing and electrical business company. And so my plan was from early on. I started working with him when I was 5 years old. So I would get off of the school bus and jump into his old Dodge truck and go out on the job sites from the age of 5. So my whole life, I wanted to be in the trades. I wanted to just carry on his business. And then fortunately, I got good at football in high school, and they were like, "Hey, we're going to pay for your school." And so the plan was for me to go to college, get my business degree, only so I could come back and run his business. Well, other things happen, and of course, we have more opportunities. But for me, I sit back and I look at the feeling of still feeling the weight, the responsibility of being the first. But what I've learned is that even though I might have felt like that and I might have felt crazy at times, you mentioned the word mentor. I do believe 100% that experience is by far the best teacher. Hands down, there's nothing like experience. However, I do not believe that it has to be your personal experience. I believe the greatest gift in the world that I have is the experience of others. That's why you and I are so quick to latch on to people who are willing to share their stories, their experience. That's why we are diving so deep into training programs and being underneath Dr. Maxwell and then diving into books and saying, well, what can I learn from someone else's heartache, headache, heartbreak? Right. And their wins so that we don't have to experience those. But now I heard you at the beginning of this episode. What's new and exciting? You're talking about Jalen coming down with your daughter, Jillian. I understand the impact or the weight that personal growth has played in your life. Now, the question I want to ask, and I'm asking this on behalf of our audience, Robin, how does personal growth become generational impact? Because I know the things you're doing for Robin today are not for Robin, they're for Jalen. And they're for your great grandkids and for the generations to come, as well as the generations of leaders that are going to come and that are going to benefit from your work. But how does your commitment to personal growth really become generational impact? If you're willing to share that, please.
Yeah, no, actually, I think of something very personal, actually, that happened not too long ago. It's one of those kind of things where I wrote it down in my reflection time as very satisfying and pretty major and just feeling good about it. We were sitting down with my daughter and her husband, myself, and Edna, my wife, and I had just finished bringing a group through the 21 irrefutable laws of leadership. And the law of legacy is the last law in the book, and it talks about the fact that we get to choose our life statement now. And so the idea is what do you want people to say about you after you're gone? And John Maxwell shares this idea that people will summarize your life in a sentence. What do you want your sentence to be? And I remember having like asking that question to the four of us, like, what do you want that sentence to be? And it was so rich to hear my daughter and her husband and Edna and myself as we shared that, Neil. And it made me realize that just asking that question is impacting them as well. And then hearing their awareness of and having the ability to actually answer that question and be in the process of working towards making sure that they actually will receive that when they're dead and gone, right? So in other words,
Hold on, Robin, right there. And I hate to interrupt, but this thing in my head is just knocking, right? And so I was listening to an interview earlier this week, and it was with a controversial figure. And he said, "Hey, every man," and ladies and gentlemen, I'm using man loosely here. He says, "Every man wants to be great. I can tell you," he said, how, I can guarantee how to tell every man to be great." He says, "Die." He said, "Because a man's greatness is never recognized until people recognize the void that he leaves," right? He says, "Now, people are going to tell you how great you are when you're gone. The problem is for most of us is that we never thought about how we wanted to construct our greatness while we were here." And so the reason that's knocking in my head now is that as you all talk about proactively answering this question on the front end, now you're going to live in a way to ensure your greatness because you're thinking about it intentionally. And so for many of our audience members, Robin, this may have been the first time they ever thought about their end, right? They ever thought about what's going to be said. What do we want said? Are we moving? Are we living in that direction now? And it's sobering, but it is also necessary.
yeah. And it's such a good question that you asked to bring that out because it ties directly in with what we're talking about when we talk about that greatness, right? That you actually have the ability to shape that. That's the point. You have the ability to dream it, first of all, to believe it and achieve it, right? And so I think it ties in directly with what we're talking about today. And then the second part of that is that I believe that as you grow, Neil, I was with a client the other day, actually a prospect. They haven't become a client yet, but I was sharing something with them that I went through and it was a big deal for me. So very, very specifically, I was talking about how I grew up with a low self-image and how I had to, become aware of it and address that and grow in that regard, right? And as I was sharing it with him that day, that person was so moved by it that it helped me to realize that it wasn't just for me. It was for me. Yes, I needed that and I needed to grow in that regard. But I realize now that it's for me to also help others with. And so that's how I think we're going to impact the future generations as we grow into becoming that person who we are are designed to be. It will impact those that we come in contact with.
Yeah, man.
It's starting with our families, right? You know what they say, leadership is caught more than it's taught. And so the people, especially that are closest to us, are going to catch that.
Robin, I wish it was the other way around. I wish people would just listen and do what I tell them to do instead of watching me. I Man, do you know how much easier and better life would be? Just do what I tell you to do
If
the
they would
first
just
time.
do what I tell them to do, I'd be so much further ahead, man. Like, come on.
Now, Robin, do you know what the other challenge is? If I would just do what I told myself to do, I would be so much further ahead too, sir.
High five on that one. That's the reality. That's the truth. That's coming back down, Robin. Get off your high horse and come on back down, baby.
Robin, so I want to first thank you for this conversation. Thank you for this time. But now we get to come to, I believe, what we believe is our favorite part of any conversation that you and I have here on The Big Life. And that's where we get to put the ball in the audience, or in the court of the audience, put it in their hands by, we always say a challenge just because it's a challenge for us. But maybe these are going to be some questions that you can reflect on, that you can spend some time on in your quiet time. Maybe you're going to go back and listen to this for a second, third, fourth, or fifth time. We greatly appreciate that. And so I'm just going to share some of these questions, if you're okay with that, Robin, for the audience. I'm going to share a handful of them. Now, there are 7 questions. I'm not going to pose all 7 questions verbally, but I am going to encourage you all to go to the show notes, go to the description, so that you can see these 7 questions. This first one is the one that I really want you to ask, because even as I was preparing for today, Robin, I had to ask this question and answer this question honestly. And I did not like the answer because I realized that I was playing small. So where have I been calling myself crazy when I may actually be first? Where have I been calling myself crazy when I may actually be first? So that's going to be the first question that I really want you to answer. And then if I may jump into this second, so I'm going to do 2 more questions, Robin. The second question: what dream, gift, or calling have I minimalized, or have I minimized because others do not understand it? What dream, gift, or calling have I minimized because others did not understand it? And then this next one, especially in the year of 2026, while we're recording this, it might be 2030, 2035 when you're listening to this episode of Robin and I. And so we thank you in advance, ladies and gentlemen. But here's the one that I think that many of us, especially as adults, as leaders, might need to answer. Where am I waiting for permission that may never come? Right? Where am I waiting for permission to be great, to be the first that may never come? And I think that if we can answer those 3 questions, I believe that both Les Brown, that Jamie Kern Lima will say they are worthy, that they do have greatness upon them, in them, and that they are doing the great work necessary to live the big life. So I'm just going to encourage you all to answer those 3, but go into the show notes, the description, and look at all 7 of these questions that we have here. Because if you will honestly ask them and honestly answer those questions, I believe your life will be better for it. Robin, what do you have for us, sir? Give me something.
Man, I love this discussion. I actually have several things that came to my mind, and I'm thinking, my man, we're already deep into this. It's time to end this particular episode. But Neil, there are 2 things that come to my mind. One is that where I was a sort of a trailblazer is I was that guy in my family that did not have a college degree, that didn't go to college, and
Wait,
that.
wait, wait, wait. You do know that surprises me, right? As much as I know about you, that surprises me.
Yeah. And that's one of those things where, yeah, I was criticized and many a times put down, and it wasn't meant that way. Like I'll give you an example. Man, can you imagine what you could have done if you went back to college? And things like that, and
Robin, hold on, hold on. So that's what we call microaggression, right? So
yeah.
as an instructor for the National Association of Realtors, when people say, "Man, Robin, you've done good, but could you imagine if you had gotten a real education?" You're like, "Hold on, wait a minute. What do you mean by that?" And so you have to sit there and say, I know you didn't mean it this way, but it stings, right?"
Yeah, definitely. I had to understand, like you were talking about earlier on what causes people, because this was a well-meaning person in my life, but they, just have a different perspective on things. They have a different understanding of things, And the other one that I wanted to share is the impact that growth has had on my life. I am that guy that kind of I dove in, Neil, at a very early stage in my life. In 1986, I made the decision I was going to be investing in my personal growth and development. And I was chewing it up, man. I was listening to tapes, what you guys now know as podcasts. I was attending seminars weekly, monthly, I was attending conferences 3, 4 times a year. These are weekend long conferences. And I was just soaking it all up. I was reading. I was on the Book of the Month Club. And so I was reading and listening and attending and doing all this stuff. And, a lot of people thought I was crazy. A lot of people thought, why, man, these guys are duping you, Rob. They're the guys who are making these tapes and selling you the books and all that kind of stuff. They're the ones who are making out, man. They're taking advantage of you.
Yeah.
And so, in that regard, I was a trailblazer. And when I look back at life now, you and I know, Neil, that I still invest in my growth. I've invested, a lot of money when I look back at it in growth and development. And that's the one that's made second to my faith, has made the biggest impact on my life and on me living more and more into my potential. It's the growth and
Robin,
investing
hold
in your
on, hold on.
growth.
So this is what I say. So you've been investing in your growth for a very long time. What year did you get started in investing in your growth, sir? Because this hit you. You know that you're 19.
1986, yeah.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, Robin said that he has a few seasons on me. He has a few years on me. I want you all to know that while he was investing in his growth, while he was developing, while he was becoming this guy, the voice of God for some people, I was 4 years old.
A babe. Think about that, man.
Come on,
Like,
man.
that-
So
That's amazing.
as we sit here, as we get ready to close out this episode of The Big Life, we talk about this idea of that you're not crazy, you're just first. And I sit here and think of how wild, and if I'm not careful, I will use bad vocabulary and say how crazy it is for two guys with different backgrounds to be doing this thing to impact the world, right? To have, and we even talked about this off camera before the mics went hot, where the relationships and how we've come together and the dreams and the goals that we have individually, and then the connections we have individually have intertwined. And now we start to see this beautiful thing. Instead of having an open hand to five fingers, we have a fist, and we know that the impact that we're going to make. And so there are no accidents, there are no coincidences. So I'm grateful for the few years prior to my foray into growth that you were willing to invest in. Really quickly, I do want to say this. Would you just quickly, because you mentioned that you were a trailblazer in that space of investing in personal growth, would you speak to our audience about the difference in investing in personal growth and seeing it as an expenditure or a spend or a waste of money, Robin? Because I'm sure that you had people who had more money than you, who may have been older than you, who saw you investing, and they saw you as just spending money or resources that you could spend somewhere else, but you chose to look at it as an investment.
Neil, I remember I was audited by the IRS. Should you even be saying that on the podcast? But nobody likes to be audited by the IRS, right? I didn't have anything to hide, but nobody likes them poking around in your business. But the long story short is it was early in my Amway days, and I was expensing, I was including the expenses or deducting the expenses that I was paying for all of these tapes and books and
Yeah.
seminars and conferences and all that
Which,
stuff.
now hold on, and that is permitted, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah.
Keep going, Robin.
The question, as I was sitting with this auditor, the question that came up because I wasn't making that much in the Amway business, right? And so the auditor, he literally was, after we finished, I proved everything and there was no problem. Everything was okay. It was all legit. I wasn't like cheating or anything like that. And so, but by the time we were done, he started to kind of look at me like he felt sorry for me, and he was suggesting to me that I was being duped by these people that were making all these things. And Neil, I remember sitting in the parking lot after that conversation, thinking about it, because as I mentioned to you, I'd heard these things from well-meaning family member also and friends and so on. Like, Rob, you're crazy. And I remember making a decision that day in the parking lot because you see, what happened is that guy, even though I wasn't making a lot of money in the Amway business, that guy, what he did not see is that my growth in my insurance business came as a result of the growth in me. What he could not see is that I was becoming a better father. I was becoming a better brother. I was becoming a better son. I was becoming a better business owner, a better leader. I was becoming a better person. And like, so I made the decision that day that I was not going to listen. I was going to follow because I questioned it, Neal, to be honest with you. I figured, this guy's probably seeing their tax returns and he's probably trying to tell me, hey, Rob, listen to me, brother. You're being duped. These guys, you should see what they're making over here. Like, come on, get your head out of the clouds. And so I was challenged by that. Neal, the reason why I share that, it's because there's no question in my mind. I mentioned to you, I mentioned to our listeners, I continue to invest in my growth today.
Yeah.
But one of the reasons why I do, and I can say without hesitation, is that it's because of that why we were able to grow beyond just Robin. We grow to the point where we were employing 22 people. So think about that now. Not only was my income significantly increased, but the business grew to where we were now supporting 22 families.
Yeah.
Just think about that. And that's because of the investment in growth. What I can tell you, Neal, is that the income that we were able to earn, the things that we're able to do to give back and so on is, what I was making. I'll put it this way. This is not about Robin, but this is answering your question because I want our listeners to hear this because a lot of people they question whether they should invest in their growth or not.
Every day we get
what
that
I want to
question.
say to them is it's been the difference maker in my life. And that's why I'm sharing these things. Neal, I can tell you that there are years and times where what we give now in support of organizations out there is multiples of what we were making back when I got audited. And the reason is because I've grown as a person, because I've grown in my skill set, because I've grown, like in all the different areas of my life. And it's through investing in my growth. And so I would encourage all of our listeners to have a growth plan, to be intentional about it. It doesn't happen. It doesn't happen automatically. If you're not intentional about it, it does not happen. And so it requires for you to invest your time and effort and resources into that without a doubt. And it will give back to you
Absolutely.
in multiples.
So the investment in yourself is the only guaranteed investment that's going to have a positive return. So
Yeah.
Warren Buffett says it all the time. All of the great investors say, if you want to have the only guaranteed positive return on investment, invest in yourself, invest in your education and growth. And so the reason I keep looking over here, Robin, is you say that. I know you're talking about different programs, but for me, oftentimes it's going to be books. I've got The Immigrant Edge by Brian Buffini over here. We talked about quickly how to talk to anyone, 92 little tricks for big success in relationships. And so whatever your investment looks like, just know, ladies and gentlemen, that you're not crazy. You might just be the first. You might be the first one to believe in healthy relationships and marriage. You might be the first to believe that Jesus Christ is your Lord and Savior. You might be the first to believe that bringing children into the world at this time is a great thing and that you're capable. You might be the first to believe that you can reach new heights in business, in health, and finances. Maybe even in vacation time or slowing down and living a peaceful life, that you don't have to live a life of hustle and bustle. And we just want to remind you that you're not crazy. You just might be the first. You heard it from two guys who have been willing to fight that battle of, am I crazy or not? But then also talk to each other and understand the importance of mentors, of friends, of wise counsel, and say, you would be crazy not to believe. You would be crazy not to try. You would be crazy not to take that step of faith. So, Robin, I want to tell you, from one non-crazy to another, thank you. Thank you for believing in me. Thank you for encouraging me. Thank you for encouraging our audience. And you always talk about my transparency, but thank you for opening your heart, your mind, your eyes and ears to make each and every one of us better, because I know that you started this journey a few seasons before I did. And
You never miss a chance for that one, baby.
dude, I tried to, but I am just in awe, right? And so, ladies and gentlemen, here's where I want to say those crazy ideas, the things that maybe you pushed off. We pushed off this podcast for a year because I thought it was crazy, and I was like, why would anyone listen to two guys from different backgrounds and upbringings and two different generations? And now I look at what we have personally, but what we're delivering to the world. And we weren't crazy. It was just the first time that we did something like this, that you and I took this step. And as a result, I know our audience, our feedback has been the same, that we are moving generations in the right direction. And we do not take that lightly, ladies and gentlemen. Now, Robin, before we go, is there anything you want to say to the audience, sir?
Man, I don't want to leave. What are you talking about,
Hey,
man? I
so
just want to kind of be here and hang with them. But, I thank you. Thank you, our listeners, for tuning in. If you've been listening this long, or maybe you've come back a couple of times to this conversation, the fact that you have come back and gotten to this point in the conversation says a lot about you. And we appreciate you. We appreciate you being a part of this. We believe in you. Neal, what I would say, what came to my mind, the big life, the BIG part of that acronym is very appropriate for what we're talking about today. The reason that we do this is because we believe in you, and that's the B, and we want you to believe in yourself and the greatness that is within you. The I is for invest in yourself. We believe that the only way that you're going to live into your potential is through intentional growth. And then the G, like we believe, and what we're doing here with you is that we believe we're given that, the believe in yourself, invest in yourself so that you can give yourself away. Like
Come on,
we're
sir.
we're here on this earth to serve others with the uniqueness and the greatness that we have. And so if we can encourage you to live the big life, the BIG life, that's what this is all about, and be well worth it to Neal and I, because we believe that that has a rippling effect, and that will, as you do so, as you live your greatness, live into your potential, it's going to affect those around you, and the effects are far reaching. You and I will never know actually how far reaching it will be.
Robin Lewis, man, sometimes you got to be smart enough to know when enough is enough. So, ladies, I'm not going to try to follow the voice of God anymore.
You're so
Ladies and
funny,
gentlemen,
brother.
we thank you for hanging out with us here on this episode of the Big Life Podcast. We do not take it lightly, as Robin mentioned. We are going to ask you to share this episode with someone. We like sincerely today. Now, usually we just ask, and I know you all like, okay, yeah. I am asking you to pause for one moment, hit the share button. I don't care if you copy the link, if you share it on your social media platforms, but share this episode with someone today. It can be with your mom. Like, hey, mom, we love you. Share it with someone today to let them know that they're not crazy. They just may be the first. So we love you. God loves you. There's nothing you can do about it. Until the next time we see you or you see us, we're right there with you.
Right there with you.
Peace.
Peace.